I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who cheats. Not because I believed in fairy tales or everlasting love, but because I always thought I was stronger than temptation. I'd been married to Mark for 11 years. We were comfortable, stable, predictable. We had a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, a dog named Bailey, and bi-weekly dinner dates that always ended by 9 p.m. with us watching Netflix separately on different sides of the couch. I wasn't unhappy exactly, but I wasn't alive either. It felt like I was on autopilot, living a life I had signed up for out of some sense of obligation more than passion. It was a random Tuesday afternoon when everything began to change. I joined a new gym in town, mostly to have something for myself. A little escape. The place had a pool, which was rare around here, and I'd started doing laps in the mornings before work. That morning, the water felt colder than usual, and I was the only one in the lane until he showed up. He slipped into the water like he belonged there. Strong shoulders, sleek movements, salt and pepper hair that somehow made him more attractive. He gave me a nod and a smile that wasn't too eager, just the right mix of polite and curious. We swam side by side for a while, saying nothing. It was the kind of silent intimacy that buzzes louder than words. When we both reached the wall, he said, "You swim like you know what you're doing." I smiled and said, "You watch like you want to learn." He laughed. God, that laugh. It was deep and a little dangerous. His name was Julian. He wasn't from around here. Just visiting for a few weeks on business, he said. Consulting for some tech firm. We started seeing each other at the pool. At first it was innocent. Morning laps, post-swim coffee, light teasing. I told myself it was just friendly, that I was allowed to talk to someone without it meaning anything. But deep down, I knew I was lying. One morning, it rained. The gym was nearly empty. After swimming, we ended up in the steam room, towels wrapped tightly, sweat and mist curling between us. The air was thick and wet, and so was the tension. I remember the moment his knee brushed mine. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Our eyes locked. He said, "You know we're playing with fire." I whispered, "Maybe I want to get burned." His lips were on mine before I even finished the sentence. Hot, wet, urgent. It felt like I hadn't been touched in years. Maybe I hadn't. Not like that. Not like he needed to memorize the shape of me with his mouth. We didn't stop at kissing. Not. That day, we took it back to his hotel room, quiet, upscale, overlooking the city. He closed the curtains, dimmed the lights. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. The moment he peeled my swimsuit off slowly, watching every inch of my skin emerge like he was unwrapping a secret, I stopped thinking altogether. His hands were confident, patient, and curious. Like he was studying me, worshipping me. I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. All I felt was alive. More alive than I had in years. The way he traced his fingers along my collarbone, then down between my breasts, like he was mapping territory no one had claimed in a long time. His mouth followed, warm and slow, tasting me like he had all the time in the world. I responded with an urgency I hadn't known I was capable of. We moved together like we'd done this before in another life. I wrapped my legs around him and pulled him into me with a hunger that shocked me. Every thrust made me forget who I was supposed to be. For the first time in forever, I wasn't a wife, or a dog mom, or a suburban woman with a grocery list in her head. I was just a woman being wanted. When it was over, I lay on his chest, my body still trembling, his hand running up and down my back like he was trying to calm a storm. And maybe he was, but the storm was inside me, and it had only just begun. We didn't talk much afterward, not right away. There was a kind of heavy silence that filled the room, not awkward, but thick with unspoken things. I should have felt shame, maybe regret, but all I felt was this strange mix of calm and anticipation, like something irreversible had begun. I sat up, wrapped in a hotel sheet, watching the rain streak down the window. He handed me a glass of water and just said, "You okay?" I nodded. I wasn't sure if I was lying. We agreed, without really agreeing, that it wouldn't be the last time. There were no promises, no big declarations. Just the look in his eyes that said he wasn't finished with me yet, and God, I didn't want him to be. The next few days were a blur of real life and stolen moments. I went home to Mark, cooked dinner, smiled like nothing had changed, but I was changed. I could feel it in the way. My body responded to everything, to touch, to silence, to the way Julian's name buzzed like a secret in my mind. We started texting, at first just light things. "You swimming tomorrow?" "I can't stop thinking about that steam room." "Do you always taste like honey, or was that just for me?" My replies got bolder. "Maybe you should find out again." "I dreamt about your mouth last night." "You make me forget my own name." Met again 3 days later. He didn't even wait this time. Pulled me into the hotel elevator the second I walked in, pushed me against the wall as soon as the doors closed. His hands were under my coat, under my blouse, his mouth finding mine like it was oxygen. We barely made it into the room. I remember the feel of the carpet on my knees, the way he said my name like it was an ache in his throat. I remember begging him, ought to stop. I remember thinking, so this is what it's supposed to feel like. The way he looked at me was addictive. Like I was rare, precious, dangerous. He kept saying things that melted me from the inside out. "You drive me insane. You're fire in a silk dress. I want to ruin you in the best possible way." And I let him, every time. I found myself scheduling my days around him, pushing meetings, making excuses. Mark never noticed. Or maybe he did, but chose not to see it. That's the thing about routine. It blinds you. It dulls the edges of change. Julian started opening up more. Told me about his life, divorced, one daughter in college. Used to be a swimmer in college too, which explained the way his body moved like it remembered every muscle. He said he hadn't felt this alive in years. I told him I hadn't either, and I meant it. It wasn't just sex anymore. It was laughter, long talks in bed, the way his fingers would find mine, even when we were just walking from the pool to the parking lot. One afternoon, he brought me lunch. Just a sandwich and iced coffee, nothing fancy. But it was the first time in years that someone thought about what I liked without me having to ask. He remembered no mayo, extra pickles. Oat milk in the coffee. I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The next time we met, it wasn't planned. I hadn't intended to see him that day. I'd gone to the pool earlier than usual, hoping to burn through the guilt that had started creeping in around the edges. But the second I stepped out of the changing room, there he was leaning back against the wall, towel draped around his neck, wet hair slicked back, like something out of a daydream I hadn't meant to have. He looked up, surprised, and smiled in that slow, knowing way that made my thighs clench before a single word left his mouth. "Early bird," he said, stepping closer. I shrugged. Needed to clear my head. He looked at me for a second longer than was appropriate. "Want company while you do?" We swam. No flirting, no touching, just long, smooth laps, the rhythm of water pushing everything else into the background. But after, in the locker hallway, I reached for my bag at the same time he reached for his, and our hands brushed. Electricity, plain and sharp. I looked up at him and something inside me snapped. I pulled him into the family changing room, locked the door, didn't say a word. He kissed me like I was a drug he was trying to quit and failing miserably. Close came off fast, our mouths never parting. It was different this time, rougher, needier. He lifted me up against the wall, his fingers digging into my thighs, and I wrapped myself around him like a lifeline. The sound of water dripping in the background only made it more surreal. We moved together in a blur of skin and breath and heat. I bit his shoulder to keep from moaning too loudly. He whispered filth in my ear, beautiful, vulgar things that made my insides shudder. When I came, it wasn't quiet. I couldn't make it quiet. And he didn't try to silence me. Afterward, we stood under the hot shower, barely touching, both of us shaking a little. He traced circles on my back and said, "I don't know what this is, but it's the best kind of wrong I've ever known." I didn't answer. I didn't want to define it. I just wanted it to never stop. We started meeting outside the gym. Lunches that turned into long afternoons in his hotel bed. Mornings where I'd sneak away from home under the excuse of early errands just to feel his mouth on my body before the day began. We never talked about the future. We didn't need to. It wasn't about what comes next. It was about right now. About the way his hands knew me better than my husband's ever had. About the way I could say filthy things in his ear and he'd respond with a growl, flipping me over like he was starving for every inch of me. We explored each other without shame. He asked what I liked, listened, tried things, made me beg. I never begged before Julian. Never felt the kind of heat that started in the pit of my stomach and spread outward like wildfire. He had this thing, he'd whisper how wet I was while his fingers worked inside me, telling me how good I looked like that, stretched out and desperate. And I was desperate for him. For the way he kissed the inside of my thighs like it was holy ground. For the way he could read my body like it was written in a language he was fluent in. Mark was a ghost to me at that point. Kind, steady, dull. I knew I was playing with fire, and every time I swore it would be the last, I'd end up naked again, tangled in Julian's sheets, clawing at his back and praying time would freeze. It got harder to separate the two lives. I'd find myself lying in bed next to Mark, freshly showered, smelling like lavender soap, while my skin still remembered the heat of Julian's mouth just hours earlier. I'd make dinner, nodding through Mark's stories about work or the new neighbor's ugly mailbox, all while my mind replayed the way Julian had bent me over his hotel desk, one hand gripping my hair, the other tracing lazy. Circles on my lower back before thrusting into me so deep I nearly cried. I started dressing differently, subtly, a little more lace under my clothes, lipstick I hadn't worn in years. Mark noticed once, said I looked nice. Julian noticed every time. Said I looked like sin, and he wanted to be forgiven by worshiping me again and again. And I let him. I craved him. He made me feel shameless, and it felt so good to stop. Apologizing for wanting. One night, after a particularly wild few hours in his hotel room, riding him slow and deep while he gripped the headboard, like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth, he looked at me and said, "You know, you never told me what you're running from." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I didn't want to say it out loud. I wasn't running from anything. I was running to something, to a version of myself I thought had died long ago, to the feeling of being needed, devoured, seen. He didn't press. Just kissed my collarbone and whispered, "I hope he never finds out." That stuck with me. Not because I feared it, but because for the first time, I wondered if I even cared. If Mark found out, would I fight to save what we had? Or would I just let it fall like a house I no longer lived in? Julian and I started pushing boundaries, riskier places. Once, he pulled me into a dark corner of the hotel's rooftop lounge, lifted my dress, and fingered me under the stars while the sound of laughter floated around us. I came biting into his shoulder to muffle the sound, my knees weak, my breath caught somewhere between guilt and ecstasy. Another time, we met in a bookstore cafe. We didn't even pretend to browse. I followed him into the bathroom, locked the door, and dropped to my knees on the cold tile floor. I took him in my mouth like it was instinct, like I needed to taste him just to make it through the rest of the day. He came with a stifled groan, his hand fisted in my hair, eyes burning into mine like I was a fever he couldn't sweat out. We were addicts, and each other was the drug. I started writing down excuses in my phone just to keep my story straight: yoga class, errands, volunteer meetings. But it wasn't the lying that made my stomach twist. It was how easy it became, like slipping into a second skin. Sometimes I'd get home and Mark would greet me with a kiss on the cheek, thank me for grabbing almond milk, and I'd want to scream, "Look at me, look what I've done, look what I'm becoming." But he never saw it. Or maybe he chose not to. One afternoon, Julian sent me a photo. Just his hand on his cock, slick and hard, a perfect tease. The message said, "This is what happens when I think about your mouth." I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom and touched myself to the sound of my own breath, thinking of his voice, his hands, the way he growled when I took him too deep. I came so hard I had to bite down on a towel. And then I went downstairs and made pasta like nothing happened. Julian started leaving marks on me. Not visible ones, he wasn't reckless, but the kind you feel long after the moment passes. The faint ache between my legs after a rough morning session in the backseat of his rental car. The sting on my inner thigh from where he'd bitten me while I sat on his face, thighs trembling, hands gripping the headboard like a lifeline. The soreness in my throat from whispering his name over and over like a mantra, like a sin I was no longer afraid to commit. And then there were the emotional marks. The look he gave me when I undressed slowly, knowing he was watching when he said, "You move like you know you own the room." Or when I told him about the dreams I'd started having, dreams where he was inside me, whispering things that made my skin burn, and he pulled me into his lap right there in the middle of the afternoon and said, "Then let me make your dreams worse." And he did, over and over. He had this way of kissing my lower back right before taking me from behind, like a silent promise that whatever we were doing wasn't just about release. It was about being known. There were days I'd see Mark watching a game or doing dishes, and I'd feel this strange pang, not quite guilt, more like a fading echo of a life I used to believe in. I'd study his profile, his kind, aging hands, and wonder how we got so far from the heat we used to have. Or maybe we never had it, not like this, not like Julian. One morning, after an early swim, Julian pulled me into the hotel elevator again, our private ritual, and instead of kissing me, he just stared, really stared. I asked what he was thinking, and he said, "I don't know what I'll do when I have to leave." That stopped me. I hadn't let myself think about the expiration date. He was supposed to be temporary, a beautiful wrecking ball, not someone who made my heart skip for reasons that had nothing to do with sex. I laughed it off, said, "Then don't." But my chest was tight the rest of the day. Later that week, we did something we hadn't done before we spent the night together. A full night, no sneaking home, no alarms. I told Mark one was going to a wellness retreat with coworkers, packed a duffel bag full of lingerie and a toothbrush. Julian booked a suite at a boutique hotel outside the city. Big tub, soft sheets, no clocks. That night was different. We didn't rush. We undressed each other like unwrapping secrets. He laid me down on the bed, kissed every inch of me before even touching between my legs. He took his time. Fingers slow, tongue deliberate, eyes never leaving mine. When he finally entered me, it felt like more than sex. It felt like surrender. Like we weren't two people stealing time anymore, but something deeper, something reckless and real. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, the sheets damp, the window open to let in the cool night air. I woke up once in the dark, his arm around my waist, his breath steady against my neck. One terrifying second, I imagined a life with him, a real one. No secrets, no sneaking. Just mornings like that, and nights where I didn't have to pretend. I closed my eyes and told myself it was a fantasy. But the thing about fantasies is they start to taste real if you feed them long enough. The morning after that night felt like slipping into someone else's life. We ordered room service coffee, fresh fruit, croissants that flaked apart between bites, and ate it in bed. Naked under the sheets, legs tangled, sunlight pouring in across his chest. He fed me strawberries, kissed powdered sugar off the corner of my lips, and said, "This is dangerous." I knew what he meant. It wasn't the sex anymore. It was the way we lingered afterward. The way he touched my face like it meant something. The way I traced the freckles on his shoulder like I wanted to memorize him. We spent hours talking about everything. He told me about his daughter, how she used to fall asleep with her feet in his lap during car rides. I told him about the first time Mark and I kissed, how I'd been tipsy and nervous and thought, this is what I'm supposed to want. He listened, really listened, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You deserve more than supposed to." That line broke something open in me. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. He saw that, pulled me into his arms. We didn't have sex again that morning. We just lay there, breathing, touching, letting the silence stretch without it turning heavy. But as I drove home that afternoon, reality started to claw its way back in. Mark was mowing the lawn when I pulled into the driveway. He waved, smiled, walked over and kissed my cheek, said, "You look relaxed. Maybe you should do those retreats more often." I laughed. Hollow and high, said, "Maybe I will." That night, I lay in bed beside him while he snored softly, and I stared at the ceiling with Julian's words echoing in my skull. "You deserve more than supposed to." I didn't sleep. I just thought about all the little compromises that had led me to this version of myself. The girl who used to write poetry, who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who once said she'd never settle for anything less than fire. And here I was, married to a man who didn't ask why I was glowing, who didn't question the new lingerie or the wine-stained lips at 11 on a Tuesday. A few days later, Julian left town. Not forever. He said it was a short trip, but something felt different when he told me. He didn't promise anything, didn't say he'd miss me. Just kissed my forehead and said, "I'll let you know when I'm back." That should have hurt more than it did, but I was too busy playing back the last few weeks like a reel in my mind. Every kiss, every moan, every secret text and stolen glance. I still felt him inside me, the ghost of his hands on my hips, the sound of his voice when he'd whisper things like, "I want to fuck the boredom out of you." And he did, repeatedly, with precision, with passion, with this kind of hunger that made me feel brand new. I still checked my phone every few minutes after he left. Even when I knew he wouldn't message, even when Mark was sitting across the dinner table, asking if I wanted to repaint the guest room. All I could think about was how Julian's hands looked with white paint on them the last time we got messy in his hotel bathroom. Mid-afternoon sun catching the curve of my ass as he bent me over the sink. The absence of him was louder than any goodbye. He was gone for 2 weeks, long enough for the silence to start echoing louder than his voice ever had. I kept waiting for the message, just a thinking of you or a miss your mouth, anything that would anchor me to the feeling he'd left behind. But nothing came, not a word. And I hated how it made me feel like an addict going cold turkey, desperate and ashamed. I started checking the hotel app, the gym schedule, anywhere he might reappear like a ghost. I wore the red lace set he loved under my clothes every day, as if that could summon him back. It didn't. And then one morning, I walked into the gym and he was there, just like that. standing by the pool in his black swim shorts, sipping from a water bottle like he hadn't disappeared and cracked something open inside me. I froze. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Heat, ache, hunger. But his eyes was different, softer, distant. He smiled when he saw me, walked over, said my name like it was still his favorite word. But when I reached for his hand, he didn't take it. He said, "We should talk." We went to the juice bar, sat in the corner. He looked at me the way someone does when they're trying not to ruin something beautiful, but knows they're about to anyway. "I met someone," he said. Just like that. Simple, clean. Like a Band-Aid being ripped off skin that had just started to scab. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just nodded, lips parted, waiting for the air to come back. "She doesn't know about us," he added. "And I won't tell her, but I can't keep doing this." I don't remember what I said. Something like, "Okay." Something like, "Thanks for telling me." But inside, I felt this quiet collapse. Not dramatic, not screaming. Just a slow, deliberate folding of everything I'd built around us. He kissed my cheek before he left, told me I was unforgettable, told me I changed him, but the truth is, he changed me. The days that followed were quiet. I deleted the texts, erased the photos, buried the lingerie in the back of my closet, but I didn't go back to who I was before. Because now I knew. I knew what it felt like to be desired, worshipped, devoured. I knew what it was to want more than supposed to. Mark never found out. Life went on. Smooth, predictable, vanilla. But sometimes when I'm folding laundry or cooking pasta or lying beside a man who still thinks I go to yoga on Thursdays, I think about Julian, the way he said my name, the way he made me feel, the way I came alive in rooms I should have never been in. And I wonder if he ever thinks of me, ... And sometimes, just sometimes, I still wear that red lace. Not for him.